right, good evening, class. Here we are again, week 5. So isn't that exciting? We're almost there. So in this week's social justice video blog, we were asked the question, what is your golden rule of counseling, and how can you participate in self-care while being an advocate? So I think first and foremost, my golden rule is going to come from Mark 12 verses 30 and 31. Simply love God, love others. In fact, the way that I show that I love God is by showing that I have love for other people. And so that's an important maxim. It's very circular. If you love God, you love others. If you love others, you demonstrate you love God. And so it's an important concept that we as human beings, as Christians, as image bearers, as name bearers of Christ, that we show love and compassion to one another. The interesting side of that is that while we're doing that, while we're loving others, how do we promote self-care for ourselves? And I think the simplest thing to do is to just be near God, spend time with God, and do your daily filling so that you are prepared to provide that love that's not inexhaustible, right? We have a limited capacity, and so when we get down to the bottom of our love tank and we've not refilled it, we're doing more harm than good to people. And so always preparing ourselves, I would say, in good devotional studies, to be with God, to be nearer to God, to draw closer to God, so that the filling of our spirit is more pronounced, and then can go forward and be proclaimed in our activity that we have with other individuals. The next part of this video blog, we were asked to choose at least one Bible verse or spiritual quotation that supports social justice. So actually there are two, right? There is the parable of the Good Samaritan, and the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is found in Luke 10, by the way, verses 25 to 37. I think that's a really good example of seeing a person who is in need. Right, and in the scripture it talks about a priest who is well aware of the law of compassion and caring for those who are weakest, who sees this individual who's been robbed and beaten and just continues on. Right. Then the next person in this parable is a Levite, a group of people who were specifically set apart for temple ministry. People who would be closest to God's law also sees this person has been robbed and beaten on the side of the road and walks by. In fact, the only person who stops to help and care for this individual is the Samaritan. The Samaritans, who are cultural half-breeds, they're half Jews, half Gentile, intermarried people that were despised by all Jews, so much so that they would go around their territory, and so not to defile themselves. And here this person demonstrates my maxim earlier, loving God, loving others. Another good Bible verse is not verse, but even a verse is, which is Psalm 9, and in that psalm David speaks of oppression and justice, but in that psalm the agent of mercy and loving kindness is God. God ultimately is the one that frees us from our bondage, whatever that bondage might be. As God's name bearers, we are the instrument of God's mercy and loving kindness. And so that whole psalm speaks about social justice. And then the last The last part of this vlog was choose at least one action that you're willing to take towards social justice. And so I struggled a little bit about this because I wouldn't really consider myself a social justice warrior of any sorts. I mean, there's too much to go into as far as my background to explain where my heart is in all of this. But so I try to narrow down what is a population of vulnerable people that need us, that need others to speak out for them, to provide mercy and compassion upon them. And as you can see in my uniform, I'm in the military. I have a heart for people in the military. I'm a chaplain. I spend my time ministering to soldiers and all the things that they struggle with. And so my social justice attitude is going to be towards that group of people. And the reason why is because veterans, their suicide rate is about 50% higher than that of the civilian population. According to the VA, 1 in 10 returning veterans have a substance abuse disorder. According to endhomelessness.org, veterans are overrepresented in the homeless community, and in 2016, nearly 40,000 veterans were identified as homeless, and about 0.5% of the American population serve in the military, in the military at all. So this is a population that's truly marginalized. It's a very small group of people who choose to serve. It's a very small population that has a type of stress on that population that most other groups don't experience. And 18 years of war has left our veteran population vulnerable. And so what I will do, what the actions I will take towards social justice is helping veterans find resources, whether it's the suicide hotline, which I'm very passionate about. I do suicide outreach all the time, and I will continue to do that. It's because it's a passion of mine. Homelessness, I've volunteered at soup kitchens. I will continue to volunteer work with organizations that help homeless people, but I really want to target the veteran population. So that's where I'm at for my social justice. And I look forward to getting feedback from my fellow classmates on this topic. And until then, have a blessed evening.